Fancy a paddleboard upgrade? Think about the paddle. What? What are you on about? Let me show you. Fancy pants board, yes. Gone for a starboard carbon Lima medium here. What on earth's all that about? Well, there's many things to consider when getting a paddle. You need to think, do you want a single shaft, single piece shaft, which is going to be lighter, stronger, but you lose a little bit of flexibility because for moving the transportation, things like that. If you're kneeling, maybe you can't use the T-grip as well. You can get a double piece one, two-piece one, which will reduce down to a smaller size. This is 3-piece, so there's another joint in there. It's got an anti-twist mechanism in there. The blade shape and size is something to consider. Let's stay on the shaft. The shaft stiffness, flex, all these things can make a difference to the way the board feels. But one thing I would say is make sure the handle's right. It's the tactile element which is really important. The size of the blade and the shape of the blade can mean you can get the paddle closer to the side of the board, which makes it easier to keep the shaft vertical, which will allow you to go straighter. But also the shape, and there's many things about paddle shapes to consider here. So I didn't just go for this because it's branded the same as my board. I researched it a bit, but you can perhaps see there are all manner of shapes on the front and the back of the board, the angle on the very leading edge of that board. All these things make a difference, and the size as well, because if you end up with a paddle that's bigger, just imagine this, you've got a paddle that's the size of a snow shovel. It would be really difficult to pull through the water, but you'd trap a lot of water. Conversely, if you had something the size of a teaspoon, you'd be paddling all day with almost no resistance. That would be no good. So you need to think about the size of the paddle blade. So I've gone for something that's a little bit smaller than on one of my other paddles. So this one's about 85 square inches, I think. The other one was 90, might be 83, something like that. It's certainly smaller. 82, there you go. It's 82.8. So my other one was not 89. So wanted to reduce that a little bit. The weight of the paddle as well is quite important. And of course, what it looks like is going to be important, because you might want one that just looks nice. So many things to consider when buying paddles. I'm going to get this one home and weigh it up and just see how it does weigh compared to another paddle. We'll do that. So here, folks, you can see my Pura Vida paddle, which came with my Kurok, and this is the starboard one that I've got now. Different shape of paddle, and the blade size is slightly bigger on this one, so I've got this one to take a bit more weight off the shoulders when I'm in racing. Look along the shaft now, you can see the total length in its sort of most smallest length, which, you know, down to the minimum, is actually the starboard smaller. But the one thing that the Pura Vida's got better than the starboard is this smooth finish. I really like the smooth finish. On here you've got a ridged finish, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just not quite as smooth, and I think that the Pura Vida feels nicer through there. Then on the handle, as you can see, the handles are a little bit more bulbous on the Pura Vida, a little bit smoother, but a very nice finish there. So the handles are both really nice feeling. What is the weight comparison? So here we go. First of all, folks, if I can get this thing working, I'll just try and hold that dead vertically. 680 versus yeah, so holding them vertically a little bit different. That board is maybe 20 grams lighter, but there's not a lot in the feel of them, so slightly narrower profile on that one. Let's have a look on the other side. Different profile there. All of these things are meant to do things like stop fluttering where the board wobbles and things like that. When I'm using both of these boards, they are premium, or both these paddles, they're premium feeling paddles. I'm not going to be upset using either of these. I kind of prefer the shape of this one. I prefer the shaft of this one. It's a much better shaft than this one. This just feels rough. So there you go, we've got 2 quality paddles, and as I said, you can share these and use them with different people because you haven't got a fixed height. Now there's one thing that's quite peculiar on these paddles, which is the way that they record height. Let me show you. That is the height on here. So this one here, if I stand that and put it the way I'd normally have it, I'll normally go to about 205 on there, which is 81 inches. That's what I consider is right on that one. And on the other one, I tend to be using, it's got a different reading. This one is a bit odd really, don't quite understand it. This one says, and I tend to go 36 is what I consider is about right. So now to compare the two, am I doing it the same? So, oh, look at that, look at that. I'm noticeably longer, so I do need to go longer. I'm kind of going longer on the Pura Vida. Isn't that funny? You get something where you think it's the right height. So to get a like for like on 205, this is really interesting. I'm going to have to go to kind of 44 on there to be exactly the same. And I know they say it's meant to be a handle and a chucker, I think is what they call it. So it's kind of that. I tend to be going a bit deeper than that, don't I? Just a little bit. Let's have a look. Just a little bit. So maybe I'm going a bit deep. So there you go, folks. So play around. So there you go, folks. Just learned something there that I'm noticeably different on the 2 of those. I've probably been using the Pura Vida a bit deeper than perhaps I should. What I need to do is go and think about it, get on the water, try the paddles. Is it possible you'd have a different shaped paddle at a different height? It's going to have a different pull in the water, force times distance. Something to consider. Let's get back to the beach and wrap this up. One other thought is cases. You're going to need a case to put your paddle in, and Pura Vida came with a beautiful Pura Vida case. Starboard, do you know those guys want to charge me 70 sovs for a case, 70 big ones for a case. So I went on Amazon or wherever, and I didn't, I went to some place, some provider, and got a red one for 30. Alright, but it hasn't got the separators in the middle, so I've had to sort of put a bit of foam in around my paddle head there, if you can see that. That was 30 quid. So if they want to persist with giving people like Red free advertising, go for it, Starboard. But if it were me, after you spend out a couple of hundred big ones on a paddle, do us a favour and don't rip us off on the paddle bag, and you'll get a bit of free advertising, because now everyone will be thinking, what on earth Steve Dog doing with a nice red paddle? Of course, I'm not too worried. Whatever's inside is all that counts, but a bit of a thought there. So of course, you know, many things to consider when buying a new paddle. And a lot of people say, I want a new paddle board, when in reality all they really want is a new paddle. That will give them quite a considerable upgrade. A lighter paddle is easier to paddle, there's less work involved, it feels great. You can take that paddle anywhere with you, use it on any board. So paddles will cost you, and you're talking the shaft as well. If you get a fiberglass or a carbon paddle shaft, that will transmit heat less readily, so in the colder months it doesn't get as cold. All manner of things to think about. You get different shaped ones, you can get ones with anti-twisting mechanisms. I've got another one that's got a hexagonal shape so it can't twist. This one's got a groove down the shaft so it will not twist. All sorts of things, let me show you that. All sorts of things to consider. So that groove, what on earth are you on about? Let me see if I can do this one-handed. Slide this up, there we go, right, there we go. You can just about see that there, that there's a groove in there to prevent that from twisting. Okay, so all manner of things to consider, and the height thing on there as well, get it the right height. It's another thing. Of course, if you've got a fixed paddle, you'll probably cut it to suit your height, which might mean it mightn't suit someone else's height. So again, if you're going to be sharing your paddle, maybe a 2 or 3 piece might be more beneficial. But yeah, if you get you can get carbon, you can get fiberglass, you can get aluminium shafts, you can get different types of blade as well, and the weight of the paddle, like I say, is really important. So if you're going to go anything below sort of 600 grams, you're starting to spend more money, and some of these paddles can cost you 300, 400, 500 pounds and up. That one there was about 200 big ones. It's a lot of money, it's a big investment, but it's that feel for it, and when you get a good paddle, you'll probably use that one more than ever. So there you go, folks. A few thoughts on paddles. Really worth considering, and there are many brands. Starboard, Nace do a lot, Joe. There are Astron do some good ones. Red do some. Who else was I thinking of? Minstrel do some, believe it. Minstrel's chocolates. They're nice, aren't they? Loads, folks. Just go and search high and wide. But if you can get your hands on the paddle and literally feel it, that's what I recommend. Catch you on the paddle smaddle flip side. I couldn't have said it better myself.